At Thanksgiving dinner, my family told me to hand over my business to my brother because he has a family to feed. When I said no, they cut me off. So I showed them who fed who. Let me tell you how everything unfolded. Before then, we share stories like this every day. If you love them, don't forget to subscribe. We are on a journey to our first 100 subscribers. Thank you for subscribing. Kindly leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. We'd love to stay connected. Now let's get into the details of the story. Thanksgiving in Atlanta always felt like a play I hadn't auditioned for, but this year, the script felt especially sharp. I showed up with a bottle of Reserve Pinot and a stack of handwritten notes for a new menu concept. My restaurants were thriving, 5 locations across Georgia, a 6th opening in Miami. But when I stepped into my parents' home, I could feel it. The way my mother barely met my eyes, the way my brother Jake hovered, smirking like he knew a secret I didn't. The living room was full of relatives, the air thick with perfume, cologne, and judgment. I hugged Aunt Margot and dodged questions from cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years. I noticed the missing name tags at the table. My usual seat was gone. Instead, I was squeezed between Uncle Rick, who always smelled like cigars and contempt, and Jake, who looked like he hadn't worked out or worked, period, in months. My chair wobbled slightly, as if even the furniture knew something was off. Dinner started with toasts. Jake got one from Dad, to bouncing back after a tough layoff. I got nothing. Just the passing of the mashed potatoes. I tried not to let it sting, but every polite laugh felt like a nail. Then came the real reason they invited me. As the turkey was carved, my father cleared his throat and said, "Ethan, we've been thinking. Your brother, he's got a family now. A mortgage. Maybe it's time you pass the torch." I blinked. "What torch?" "Your business," Mom chimed in, as if it were obvious. "You don't have kids. Jake needs stability." I actually laughed, then caught myself. "Wait, you're serious?" Jake leaned in, trying to look humble. "It'd be temporary. I just run it for a while, take some weight off your plate." "I like what's on my plate," I said. "And I built it with my bare hands while you were still living off Dad's golf club contacts." That was when the smiles started to crack. My mother's eyes narrowed. "Don't be selfish, Ethan. Family shares." "Family doesn't demand," I said. "Family supports. I've supported Jake more times than I can count. You all just didn't see it." The room fell silent. You could hear knives scraping plates. Jake's wife, Tanya, looked down at her lap. Dad cleared his throat again. "Son, we're not asking. We're telling you, it's the right thing to do." I stood up slowly. No, then it happened. My mother stood, walked over, and slapped me. Not a dramatic, soap opera slap. A cold, deliberate one. Her hand didn't shake. "You ungrateful boy," she whispered. "Everything we gave you, and this is how you repay us?" I didn't say anything. Not because I was in shock, but because the truth had settled in my chest like a stone. They never saw me, never believed in me. I was useful, but never valuable. I was a tool, not a son. I looked around the table. No one defended me. Not my cousins. Not my uncle. Not even my aunt, who once called me the miracle kid for buying her dinner after a medical scare. I wasn't a person to them anymore. I was a wallet, a ladder. And now that I said no, I was an enemy. I placed the Pinot on the table untouched and walked out. The air outside was cold and dry, but it felt like oxygen compared to that dining room. I didn't drive straight home. I parked outside one of my restaurants, a late-night seafood bistro near the Beltline. I sat on the curb and let the streetlights hum above me. Inside, I saw my staff laughing, plating oysters, moving with rhythm and purpose. My real family. I'd made mistakes in life, burned out a few times, slept in my car once, but I'd never asked for a bailout. Never expected anyone to hand me a thing. Jake had been given everything and still felt owed more. And my parents? They just endorsed the theft. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just made a list. On one side, every loan I ever forgave, every rent payment I'd quietly covered for Jake, every favor I'd done for Dad's friends, every holiday I'd flown home out of guilt. On the other side, what I owed them. It was blank. I went inside, poured myself a whiskey, and sat in my office. I started pulling files, legal, financial, operational. It was time to clean house. Not just protect what I'd built, but reframe it. I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story, pretend I was being cruel. I was going to show them the truth. They wanted to shame me at Thanksgiving, but I was going to serve the main course, and it would be cold. They always said I was quiet. Too quiet. As a kid, I didn't push back when Jake took the bigger slice of cake, or when he got the better room on family vacations. I kept to myself, sketching restaurant ideas in old notebooks while they called me weird. At 16, I was washing dishes in a diner after school. Jake got a new car just for passing algebra. I built grit. He inherited charm. But charm doesn't pay bills. I remembered that the night they turned on me. College wasn't handed to me. I took out loans, worked midnight shifts, and started managing a campus cafe. I learned how to keep books, hire staff, fix fryers, talk to customers. My parents never visited once. At graduation, they skipped my ceremony to attend Jake's soccer tournament, a game he didn't even play in. When I texted them a photo in my cap and gown, my mom replied, "Oh, I thought that was tomorrow." That was the day I stopped expecting applause. While I was grinding, Jake was floating. He got into a decent state school but dropped out by sophomore year. Said it was too stressful. Then came the string of jobs, real estate, car sales, a failed crypto podcast. Each time he landed flat, mom and dad bailed him out. I sent checks home when dad got sick, paid for repairs on the house, even helped Jake once with rent. They called it family duty. But what they really meant was mine. I opened my first restaurant at 27. A tiny spot in Midtown Atlanta with sticky floors and secondhand chairs. I slept in the office some nights. Did everything from chopping onions to unclogging toilets. 2 years later, it made its first million. I reinvested every dollar, opened 3 more locations. My staff called me boss. My parents called it a phase. Jake called it luck. They never ate there unless it was free. They never once said, "We're proud of you." Back in the present, I sat in my home office after that disaster of a Thanksgiving. I opened my laptop and pulled up files. I wasn't just mad. I was surgical. I reviewed ownership documents, contracts, and revenue charts. Everything was in my name. No silent partners. No debts. Just clean, hard-earned equity. I transferred sensitive documents to an encrypted drive and texted my attorney. Need a full audit. Quietly. Then I started digging into Jake. He had no idea I kept tabs. His social media was a trail of irresponsibility, luxury he couldn't afford, sponsored posts for scams, a girl he dated who once DM'd me asking for a job. I found unpaid credit cards, a shady business license registered in his name but tied to my mailing address. He used my success to inflate his image. I took screenshots of everything. The more I unearthed, the colder I became. I scrolled through old family photos. Christmases where I stood in the back, birthdays where my name wasn't even on the cake. There was one from Jake's wedding, where I paid for the bar, and they listed me as +1 in the program. I remembered every slight, every fake smile. Every time they said, "You should be more like Jake." I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Let them believe I was licking wounds, that I'd come crawling back like always. Jake probably thought I'd cool off and cut him a check. Maybe even hand over part of the business, like it was mine to spare. He had no clue I was preparing to starve them of every benefit they'd quietly enjoyed. The company perks, the insider access, the whispered associations, gone. That week, I changed all corporate passwords and froze family discounts in the company system. I rerouted promotional budgets away from Jake's area. I even reassigned our local charity partnerships. My restaurants no longer sponsored the neighborhood events my parents bragged about. It wasn't loud. It wasn't vengeful. It was clinical. I didn't need to scream. I just needed to take back what was mine. The final step was personal. I wrote a letter, not an email, not a text. A letter. I mailed it to my parents, unsealed. It read, "You taught me family means sacrifice. I agree. That's why I've stopped sacrificing for yours. I built something you never believed in. You tried to shame me into giving it away. Consider this the last thing I give you. Freedom from my success. Use it wisely." Then I poured myself a drink and watched the city lights from my penthouse. For years, they pretended not to see me. Now, I was about to become unforgettable. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I showed up at my downtown office earlier than usual. The hum of fluorescent lights welcomed me like a ritual. I poured black coffee, opened my laptop, and pulled up contracts. Jake's name appeared in the vendor list for our upcoming Southern barbecue expansion. I stared at it for a long second, then right-clicked and removed him. It was almost too easy. Years of trust evaporated with a few keystrokes. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calculating, and they had no idea the timer had started ticking. By Wednesday, I'd terminated 3 handshake deals my father thought would sail through. He'd banked on my silence and gratitude. One was a property rights arrangement for a coastal diner he claimed he could manage. I'd smiled at the table when he mentioned it. Now I was making calls to sell it off, at a loss if I had to. I wasn't trying to profit. I was trying to erase them from the table they thought they built. I fed them once. Never again. My legal team was efficient. Discreet. I'd always paid them well to clean messes. Now I was asking them to build walls. We scrubbed family names from asset files, restructured internal voting shares, and quietly revoked Jake's emergency business credit line, the one he didn't even know I'd approved months ago. My assistant flagged his mortgage file. I bought the debt, dressed it in silence, and left it wrapped beneath their tree of arrogance. It was a different kind of gift, one you unwrap when the lights go off. I stopped posting on social media. No more chef features, no gala selfies, no mentions of upcoming store launches. Silence is louder when people expect noise. My inbox filled with messages from extended relatives. Hey, just checking in. Or, hope you're doing okay. Lies wearing concern like cologne. I ignored them all. Meanwhile, Jake kept tagging me in old photos, throwing passive-aggressive shade online about loyalty. I read them like I read Yelp reviews, irrelevant and desperate. 2 weeks later, I received an invite to the local holiday charity gala. My company was listed as a primary donor. It was the same event Jake and I attended every year, smiling for cameras like some Southern GQ brothers. Only this year, I RSVP'd with a +1. I picked up my date in a black town car, crisp winter air slipping through the window cracks. She wore a blue silk dress and introduced herself with a firm handshake. Monica Reynolds, bank recovery officer. The woman now managing the foreclosure on Jake's house. We arrived under twinkling lights and 1,000 whispers. I walked in with Monica on my arm, the red carpet rolling out ahead of us like spilled blood. Photographers angled for shots. I smiled. Jake's friends were already inside. So were some of my investors. I made rounds like a ghost at my own funeral, shaking hands, giving brief nods. Every person I greeted made eye contact with Monica. Every time she introduced herself, their expression shifted. Pieces were falling into place. And Jake hadn't even arrived yet. By the time my parents walked in, I was seated at the main table, sipping bourbon and talking about expansion into Texas. My father froze mid-step when he saw me. My mother's jaw tightened. No one said hello. They sat at a corner table, pretending not to notice me. Monica leaned in and whispered, "They look like they've seen a ghost." I nodded, letting the moment hang in the air. For once, I didn't have to raise my voice. I just had to be seen. That was enough. Jake arrived last. He stormed in late, probably still hungover from whatever he'd been doing to numb himself since Thanksgiving. When he spotted Monica across the room, his face dropped. I watched the recognition crawl over him. I could practically hear the gears grinding in his head, then seizing. He approached our table slowly, like a man walking toward a car crash he couldn't stop. "What the hell is this?" he asked, voice low. I tilted my head and sipped my drink. "You remember Monica, right? She works in real estate finance." He exploded in hushed tones, accusing me of sabotage, betrayal, cruelty. I just listened. Calm. Cold. The way they taught me to be when they made me earn every scrap. "You should have thought about that before trying to take what wasn't yours," I said quietly. "Now you get to experience life without handouts." Monica touched his arm lightly, her tone professional. "You'll receive your foreclosure schedule next week. We can talk settlement, but the asset is ours." He stood frozen, eyes darting between us, and then walked out without a word. The room settled after he left, but the whispers didn't. I'd made no speech. I hadn't outed anyone publicly. I hadn't thrown a fit. I'd simply arrived with receipts. That night, I shook hands with 3 new business partners and signed a distribution deal for my signature sauce. As the gala ended, Monica hugged me goodbye. "That was surgical," she said. I just smiled. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about clarity. I wasn't the broken one. I was the one holding the blade, and they didn't even know they were bleeding yet. When I got home, my voicemail had 12 messages. One from my father, demanding an explanation. One from my mother, crying. Jake left 5, ranging from threats to begging. I played none of them. Just pressed delete. Then I poured myself a drink and turned off my phone. Outside, Atlanta shimmered with holiday lights, but my world was quiet. Clean. I wasn't feeding anyone anymore. I wasn't saving anyone. I was finally full. The invitation was handwritten, embossed with gold leaf, and mailed first class. No digital invites. No group texts. Just old-fashioned elegance. Each envelope was addressed in ink, sealed with the restaurant's monogrammed wax stamp. The location, my flagship restaurant in downtown Atlanta. The message inside, a celebration of family and gratitude. No one knew what I had planned, but they all RSVP'd, every single one of them. I suppose guilt is an excellent motivator, especially when it comes disguised as free food and forgiveness. The night of the dinner, I stood by the entrance wearing a charcoal suit, no tie, sleeves rolled. The restaurant was candlelit, warm, perfumed with rosemary and smoke. A private jazz trio played in the corner. As each family member arrived, they wore polite smiles and tight shoulders. My mother kissed my cheek like she hadn't slapped me 2 weeks earlier. My father gave me a firm handshake, the kind men use to measure control. Jake showed up last, jaw tight, eyes scanning every corner. He didn't greet me. I didn't mind. Wine flowed. The first course was plated. Laughter tried to bloom, but it came out stiff, hollow. I watched them squirm in their seats, complimenting the space they once mocked. They marveled at the menu, forgetting they used to call it a hobby. I let them talk. I wanted them full not just of food, but of comfort, of delusion. I waited until dessert, until the plates were clean and the wine bottles near empty. Then I stood. The room quieted. Every eye turned to me. The jazz stopped. I want to thank you all for coming, I began, voice calm. It's rare we all sit together anymore. So I thought tonight we should celebrate. Not just food or success, but honesty. A flicker of confusion passed through the room. I tapped the folder beside my glass. Thick. Tabbed. Neat. I brought receipts, I said. A few nervous chuckles. I opened the folder and began to read. December 2019. Jake, $12,700 wired to cover credit card debt. Never repaid. January 2020. Cousin Trent. Rent covered for 3 months. No thank you. May 2021. Uncle Dave. Personal loan to save his bakery. Business closed. I absorbed the debt. One by one, I listed them. Names. Amounts. Dates. Some winced. Some looked away. My mother's eyes welled, but she didn't speak. My father clenched his jaw. Jake just stared at the table. I flipped to the final page. These weren't loans, I said. They were sacrifices. Gifts. I gave because I loved you. Because I thought family meant something. I paused. Let the silence stretch. But when I said no, you slapped me. You turned your backs. You mocked me. I scanned the room. So tonight, I'm giving you one more gift, the truth. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thick stack of legal notices. Each marked with dates, each notarized. Effective immediately, no member of this family is entitled to shares, credit, or partnerships with my company. Gasps. My aunt whispered, "What?" Jake stood up, furious. "You planned this? You set us up?" I didn't raise my voice. "No, Jake." I set myself free. He knocked over his chair and stormed out. My mother started crying. My father demanded I be reasonable. I walked to the bar, poured a bourbon, and turned my back to them all. Behind me, chairs scraped. Voices rose. I didn't listen. For once, I didn't care. I sipped slowly, savoring the silence between explosions. One by one, they left. Some muttered curses. Others said nothing. A few paused at the door, maybe expecting me to stop them. I didn't. I stayed at the bar until only the jazz trio remained. I turned and raised my glass to them. "Play something for me," I said. And they did. Something slow. Something earned. I sat alone in the restaurant I built with my own hands, surrounded by warmth and absence. And for the first time in years, I felt full. That night, I walked home instead of calling a car. Atlanta was quiet, the wind crisp with coming winter. My phone buzzed again and again in my pocket. I didn't check it. The city pulsed around me, alive and uncaring. I smiled. The weight I'd carried for so long, the need to be accepted, the hunger to be seen was gone. They thought feeding them was love. They were wrong. Real love doesn't demand. It doesn't slap. It doesn't steal. From now on, I would feed only those who brought something to the table too. I rewrote everything. My will, my company bylaws, even the vision board I'd once hidden behind a kitchen pantry door. My name would no longer be attached to anyone who'd spit on it. Instead, I set up a scholarship in the name of my first mentor, Chef Raoul, the man who gave me my first job washing dishes and believed I could run a line before anyone else did. The fund would support young chefs who had nothing, just like I once had. This time, I'd feed the right people. The partnership came next. A rising restaurant group out of Chicago, raw, smart, hungry. We signed the deal at my rooftop bar while the skyline turned gold in the distance. They respected what I'd built, not just the profits. They listened when I spoke. They didn't demand loyalty like it was owed. The deal gave me national reach. Ethan Carter Restaurants was expanding, and not a single family member would touch it. That was the cleanest breath I'd taken in years. My phone buzzed with an email from my mother. Subject line blank. I didn't open it. I hadn't opened the last for either. A few voicemails from my aunt. A long Facebook message from a cousin I barely remembered. All unread. All unwanted. It took a while to get here, but I'd learned silence could be louder than any scream. And mine echoed. My family no longer needed me. They needed a miracle. Jake had moved to Oregon, jobless, burnt through whatever savings he had. My parents? Selling assets. I didn't blink. There was no pleasure in watching them fall. That's the part no one understands. I wasn't gloating. I didn't need their suffering. I just needed peace. And you don't get peace while holding on to anchors disguised as blood. I still remembered Thanksgiving night like a shadow burned into my chest. The sting of my mother's slap had long faded. What stayed was the truth in that moment when no one stood up for me. When their silence told me everything. That memory kept me walking forward. I began spending more time in the kitchens again, not in suits, not on calls, but behind the line, sweating beside kids who reminded me of me. We talked about dreams, about their recipes, about how hard it was to believe in yourself when no one else did. I saw myself in every hungry face, every burned knuckle, every secondhand apron. I gave them hours, advice, second chances. They didn't owe me anything. That was the difference. That's why I slept better now. That's why food finally tasted good again. One rainy night, I was closing up a newly opened spot in the West End. Rain tapped at the windows like it was trying to get in. I turned off the last light, keys in hand, when the door creaked open. A guy in his 20s walked in, soaked, nervous, eyes full of something I recognized. "Are you Ethan Carter?" he asked. I nodded. "Your story, what you did. You built this yourself. You walked away from the ones who used you. You don't know me, but that gave me courage." I stood there, stunned. He wasn't the first to say something like that, but he was the first to say it and look like he needed it. Like I wasn't just some success story, but a reminder that you could walk through fire and come out clean. I told him to sit. Made him a meal right there. No menu. Just instinct. We didn't talk much, and that felt right. Not every conversation needs words. He left full. I locked up, stepped into the quiet. The rain had stopped. The world felt hushed. I felt light. Back at home, I sat by the window of my high-rise, watching the city pulse beneath me. No parties. No calls. Just jazz on a speaker and a glass of wine I actually liked. My laptop blinked open with analytics, another new scholarship application. The fund was growing fast. In another tab, I saw an article about Jake's new GoFundMe. No one in my world had shared it. I smiled once, then let the tab close. The final click was clean, simple. A sentence formed in my mind like a punctuation mark. They thought feeding them was my duty. Turns out, cutting them off was my gift. If you connected with this story and want more like it, about betrayal, quiet revenge, and the kind of healing that doesn't look like victory, subscribe to the channel. I share stories that cut deep and stay with you.